Welcome to the Run for God Run Club, where you will find God in a runner's space.
Welcome to the Run for God Run Club. This is your one stop each week to be motivated and inspired to get off the couch and onto the running trail, where you can in turn inspire others to do the same. Let's learn, laugh, and leap into running together, giving God the glory for what we are able to do in His name. Amen. I'm your running host, Dean Thompson. Today, we are going to have a special treat because I talked with Eden Morris earlier this week, and we're going to share our conversation about diet and how we fuel our bodies for all the activity demands we place on our bodies. And with me once again to talk about some other things is Mitchell Hollis.
Thanks for having me, Dean.
Man, it's been a good summer so far, but it seems like it's either raining like hard or it's not raining at all.
You know, we had one of those lightning strikes last night. I was in my building beside my house, but I had the door open. I was actually changing the doorknob on my building because we're at 18 years in our house now, so we're starting to have all those little weird things that go wrong, like doorknobs not working.
Yeah.
So I was changing the doorknob, and the whole sky lit up, and I saw a lightning strike hit right in the road out in front of my house, and the neighbors across the street, their kids were in the pool because you could tell something was coming, but it wasn't here yet. So I don't blame them for being in the pool.
Yeah,
I've never seen kids get out of a pool so fast in my life. But yeah, we've just had these downpours here lately, which I don't mind. We need rain this time of year. But
we do. It's been good.
So yeah.
And the Tour de France is on too. I know you're a big follower of the Tour de France.
I follow it. Yeah. I haven't followed it as close the past couple of days. Lane's been gearing up. Lane and Holly took off for Long Beach, California this morning. Lane's got a race out there, so Lane and I are going to hang around here at the bachelor pad, we're calling it, for this weekend. So yeah, I'll get caught up this weekend though. But it's been fun to watch.
It was very interesting yesterday.
Really? Don't tell me. I haven't watched yesterday.
Well, there was
I purposely took social media off my phone.
Is that right? Yeah.
During this time, because it never fails. As many things I follow about cycling and endurance sports, you'll
see an update.
Yeah, I'll see an update, or I'll see who won.
Well, the interesting thing has nothing to do with the race.
Really?
The interesting thing is that there were some protesters who showed up. So I'll leave it at that.
Yeah.
So yeah,
well, that'd be fun to watch.
Very interesting. Yeah.
So how's your week been?
Been good. It's been busy. We had been crazy busy. The last 24 hours, I've been running from one place to another. But I've always said I like being busy. It's better being busy than bored, right?
Yeah. Oh yeah, for sure. All right, well, let's talk about our sponsor for this week. Again, if you have a business and you would like for Run for God to support what you do, in turn, you can support what we do. Send an email to runlanehollis@gmail.com. He'll get you all the information on that. But this week's sponsor is Gathered Goods. They are a very special kind of produce market. It only happens a handful of times a year, ran by Casey Carpenter, a local household name here in Dalton. And they provide the freshest produce shipped in just days before the sale, sometimes even the day of. The variety of goods they bring is just unreal. It is really a great organization, so be on the lookout for the next produce run by Gathered Goods. It's worth every penny. And I think they just had this a couple weeks ago again. Casey is he's a unique entrepreneur. Because I'm convinced if Casey is awake and he's breathing, he's trying to figure out how to start a new business he has his hand in everything here. Yeah. And, but it's fun to watch. I mean, he owns a lot of businesses here in town, and you'll see him. We were eating at his pizza place a few weeks ago, and I saw a van back up, and he's unloading pizza supplies.
Yeah.
I mean, he's
right in the middle of it.
3 restaurants now. And, but he is not afraid to work, which is refreshing. I mean, because so many people are trying to look for ways to get out of work nowadays, but he's like, what can I be doing? Which is fun to watch.
Well, I was just talking with a couple of our Dalton State athletes this morning that work for him, that work at the Oakwood.
Yeah. And he's got a lot of young people working down there.
He does, and they do a good job there.
Yeah.
Well, we had a Facebook post last week. I wanted to share one that was really short and to the point, and this one comes from Stephanie Pinchak Marino, and this is all it says. It said, nothing to see here, just a 9-mile feel-good run. It was hot.
I saw this one. Yeah, I like that.
I do too. And it kind of underscores this whole thought that we have so many people who have never run before, and they get to this point where it really is. Look, it's just a 9-mile run.
Right.
It's not a big deal.
Yeah.
You know, and it's really cool to see that be the case. And if you're listening and you're not at that point where 9 miles can feel like just another run, you'll get there.
Yeah.
You just be consistent and keep working on it, and you'll get there.
And if I'm not mistaken, I haven't looked this up, Stephanie, so if I get this wrong, I'm sorry, but I believe she's from Orlando, isn't she? I think she lives...
I think somewhere, yeah.
I think she drove in for the Disney Marathon right there close by. Now, that's hot.
Yeah.
Orlando this time of year, that's just miserable down there.
It's so humid down there.
She's correct when she says it was hot. But,
yeah. Here, you know, we get the humidity sometimes here, but we also get breaks from the humidity.
Yeah, this morning.
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah, down there in mid-Florida, it just never eases up during the summertime. Yeah. And there's some other places. Then you go out west, and they don't know how to deal with humidity at all.
No.
They come out this way, and they're like, they can't breathe.
Well, we joke about it, but it's true. We call it the poor man's altitude.
That's right.
You know, it's just if you can train and perform midday here in North Georgia or South Georgia, that's as good as going to altitude because it's just hard. It really, I mean, you really have to adjust your pace or you'll get in trouble really quick. So
yeah. I remember. I think about this from my standpoint. I remember a time when I would do a long run on a Saturday morning, and then afterwards I would just kind of feel like I needed to lay around for a while, you know, to recover from it. Maybe take a nap or something.
Yeah.
And now it's like after years and years, it's like as soon as I get done, it's like, okay, what do I need to do? I get on the lawnmower and I go cut grass, or you know, I'm out in the yard doing something, or you just don't slow down. It's just you just do it and you keep moving on. It's just part of your day, and it's no big deal. And
and just like altitude, you do acclimate.
Yeah,
I mean, it's you know, those first few hot days of the year, it's like, whoa, where did this come from?
Yeah.
But by the time you get to now, it's like we just got to live with it. You have to.
That's the whole point. Yeah. Yep. That's it. All right. Well, we had a trivia question for last week, and this was the trivia question. There's an Ethiopian runner who won 2 gold medals in the 10,000 meters, as well as Olympic gold medals in the 10,000 meters, as well as 4 world championships in the event. But he was good at many distances up to the marathon. He was the first man to break 2 hours and 4 minutes. Overall, he set 27 world records. Who is he? Did you know this name?
No, you said that I should know this name, but I've never seen this name.
Never seen the name. That's incredible.
Really?
Haile Gebrselassie was at one time, you know Kipchoge, how big a name he is. You know, but Bekele, how big a name he was. We're kind of past that now. Well, Haile was the guy before Bekele.
Really?
Yes. So, yeah, he was. I mean, but. Here's the way I put it. He was the Bekele before Bekele and the Kipchoge before Kipchoge.
Yeah.
He was
both of those.
Yes.
Is pretty impressive.
Yes. And that's just really who he was. He was kind of you know, he was on the track for a while and absolutely dominated 5K, 10K, and then he moved up to the marathon and then dominated the marathon for a number of years. And just again, two gold medals in the 10,000 meters and then 4 world championships in the 10,000 meters as well. He won the Berlin Marathon 4 times, which is one of the masters. He's won 3 state Dubai marathons, which is a fast marathon. He's won 4 world titles in the World Half Marathon Championship. He's done everything. He had 61 Ethiopian national records that ranged from 800 meters to the marathon. I don't know anybody who's got that kind of range.
That's usually 2 completely different people, or 3.
Yeah.
I mean, usually that would be, if you're going all the way down to the 800, all the way to the marathon, that's 3 different people nowadays.
Yeah.
At least.
Yeah. And when he broke 2:04 for the first time, he was 35 years old.
Where did he do that?
He did it in Berlin.
Okay.
And, he broke his own world record at the time by 27 seconds. And that was after he had broken it the year before, I believe.
And the world record open marathon time right now is what?
2:01:39.
Okay.
I think. Yeah. So yeah, it's gotten a little bit faster, but Haley was the one that I think, and I didn't go and check this progression, but I really feel like at some point in time we went from 2:08 was a really fast marathon to now it's 2:04 was a really fast, it almost seemed like overnight. I think that was Haley who's the one that pushed that. He's the one that really lowered that. Now there were some other guys in there with him that were doing it too, but I think he was the one that kind of perpetuated it. He was named one of the top 100 most influential Africans by New African magazine in 2011 because he's involved in a lot of stuff. I mean, he had a great running career, but now he's got a great business career as well, and it's cool to see that. So he was one of 10 children born in Asella, Ethiopia. He grew up on a farm, and he ran 10K to school every day. And one of the interesting things is that when you watch Haley run, he had an interesting form. He had this little cock with his left arm as he ran. And the reason he had that kind of a cocked left arm while he ran, they say, is because he ran all those 10Ks with his books in his arms, going to and from school.
How to do it.
Yeah. So it kind of just stuck with him. So, of course, he came on the scene in 1992. So that's been a while back when he won the 5,000 meters and the 10,000 meters at the World Junior Championships. That's how it's like, whoa, who is this guy? And boom, by the next year, he was a world champion. And he won 4 world championships in 93, 95, 97, and 99 in the 10K. And then he even finished third at the World Cross Country Championships in 94. So he was just the range was stunning. He was, I think, the second guy to break 13 minutes. I think Said Awida was the first guy, and then I think he was the second guy to break 13 minutes for the 5K. And then in 95, he ran 26:43 to set the world record by 9 seconds in the 10K. And then he lowered his 5K record from 12:56 to 12:44. And then he went later in that summer. He went. I mean, this guy, he just won one thing after another at these different distances. And when he took chunks off of the records, he took big chunks. Yeah. And there was a guy back then named Daniel Komen. You probably never heard Daniel Komen's name. Daniel Komen would be a household name today if it weren't for Haile Gebrselassie, because he just overshadowed him. He was like, Daniel Komen was born at the wrong time. Yeah. Because he happened to be good at the same time. It's sort of like Lane with what's his name? Schellenberger. You know, it's just like he's always been a little overshadowed by Schellenberger. That's kind of the way it was for him. But when Haley beat Komen in the Zurich Classic in August of 97, he ran the last 200 meters in 26.8 seconds to break his 5K record. Ran 12:41 that day. So to be obviously running that fast and then to finish in under 27 seconds is pretty impressive. But then Komen came back not just 9 days later and broke that record and ran 12:39. But anyway, he's indoor records of 2,000 and 3,000 meters. He had outdoor world records at several distances. He got down to 26:22 in the 10K and ran when he ran that 26:22, he ran 13:11 and 13:11 for the 2 5Ks. That's some pacing right there. Yeah, that's pretty impressive. And then he had this race where in this 5K where he set this record. He was trying to break the world record, but he got to 3,000 meters and they realized 3,200 meters, and they realized he needed 3,400 meters rather. He needed a last 1,600 of under 4 minutes, which a 1,600 is almost a mile. It's 9 meters less than a mile. He needed to run under 4 minutes to break the world record. Everybody's like, "Oh, there's no way he can do it." All the commentators were like, "Oh, well, it was a good shot, but he's not going to do it." And then he did it. He ran 3:59 for the last 1,600 meters of a 5K.
Wow.
That's just nuts. So, there's only two other guys who have won two consecutive. At the time, there were only two other guys who had won the 10,000 meters in back-to-back Olympics, and they were Emil Zatopek and Lassie Viren, two of the biggest names ever in the 10K. So, and then in that last Olympic victory, he ran the last 200 meters in 25.4 seconds. There are very few people in the world who can run 25.4 seconds for a 200 meters, let alone doing it at the end of a 10K.
Okay, so I've read ahead a little bit.
Yeah.
I think I might know who this guy is, but not because of his running. I knew that he was a runner, but I've actually seen, you've got in here that he is now a small lot coffee farmer.
Yeah.
In Ethiopia. I've seen a special on him.
Okay. Yeah.
On TV, and it was, I forget what it was, but I just got into it. It was talking about a small coffee farmer, because the name rung a bell. I said I'd never heard the name, but something sounded familiar. But I don't know what it was on. Maybe it was on the Food Channel, Food Network, or something. But yeah, I saw a special on this guy talking about his coffee farming, and it talked about that he is a former
world-class runner.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, I knew him from the coffee side.
Son of a gun. Wow. Yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah.
So he did all these crazy things, and one of the things that he did toward the end of his 10,000 meters, kind of that portion of his career, was he and Bekele ran this 10K, and actually Bekele beat him. This was when Bekele was really, really good. And right at the end of, they both ran under 13 minutes for the second half of a 10K. And you got to remember that Haley had just a few years before that broken the 5K world record by running 12:56, and here he is running 12:58 on the second half of a 10K. Just absolutely insane how good he was. And then, of course, he changed to the marathon, or changed to the roads. He got into the half marathon and did really well in the half marathon, won several championships there. And then he started running marathons. And he was a lot like Kipchoge. He went a couple of years without losing any race anywhere of any distance. And he was incredible how good he was. And, of course, in 2007, he won the Berlin Marathon in 2:04:26. Setting a world record in that case, which is 4:44 per mile. And then he had taken 29 seconds off the world record in that case. And then the next year he comes back and he runs 2:03:59, taking another 27 seconds. So basically in a year, he took a minute off of the world record.
It's crazy.
In the marathon. But here's an interesting thing about him is that he suffers from asthma. So in the Beijing Olympics, he was worried about the air pollution, and he didn't run in the Beijing Olympics in the marathon in 2008 because he was afraid of the pollution. He was afraid he couldn't handle it because he's asthmatic. Of course, he regretted that, not running it afterwards. But I thought that's interesting. So many people think I can't do because I have asthma. Well, here's a guy, maybe one of the greatest distance runners of all time, had asthma.
Yeah.
And of course, I see a lot of our girls have asthma. So. Yeah. So just great.
Interesting guy.
He's retired now. And like I said, he's doing all these other things. You mentioned the coffee farming. He's got a car dealership. He's got some rental property. I read somewhere where these apartments that he owned, they burned down. So he's had some setbacks and adversity to deal with too. But he's a lot like Edison. Edison, they always talked about how positive he was no matter what happened. Well, he's the same kind of guy. When adversity hits, he's got this positive attitude and a positive outlook toward everything. And it's really, really cool to see.
Wow.
So he's also been part of the Athletes Commission, the IAAF Athletes Commission. So he's been involved with the sport a lot. He's really focused on trying to make sure the sport is looked upon well. He mentors some younger athletes. He was in they did a movie of him called Endurance in 1999. I still haven't seen that. But he also, I'm looking for, he had, when he retired, this is the way he announced his retirement. I'm retiring from competitive running, not from running. You cannot stop running. this is my life.
Wow. Well said.
Yeah. So yeah, he's one of a kind.
Yeah.
Really, really cool guy, big heart, and people love him. So neat to see people like that.
Good story.
Yeah.
All right. So we got the Hawkins fundraiser 10K in the rearview mirror now. That was a lot of fun.
Yeah.
But we've got something else to look forward to. August, the new website is launching. We don't have the exact day yet, but it's
around the corner.
It's good stuff. I've spent a lot of time on it the past few days, and it's going to be a game changer. I'm very excited about it. So you'll start to get some correspondence about it. We've got to, all of our members are going to have to do a few things to get over onto it. We just have no choice. It's going to be a few different steps, but I'm sure everybody will be able to do it without any problems. But we're excited about it.
Yeah, that's awesome. All right. Well, we are sponsored by J Radio. So if you haven't checked them out yet, go check out J Radio.
As a mom, I want to make sure we choose a cereal that's not entirely derived from sugar. Their car seats have to be nationally CPS certified, and their first car has to have every possible safety feature known to man. I just want to do my best to make sure that they're safe. One thing I don't have to worry about is the content they hear on J Radio. Not only do they love the music, but I know it's only going to be a positive message that I would approve of. Now, if I could just figure out how to get my youngest from sticking everything up his nose.
Sign up at jradio.com and download the new J Radio app in your app store.
All right, so I'm here with Eden Morris. Now, Eden has joined us before, and if you don't know who Eden is, she is the owner, operator, the whole shebang of the Teton Performance Nutrition. You can find her at tetonperformancenutrition.com. She's a registered dietitian. She is an athlete herself, both in her former life through college, where she learned an awful lot, and which we may get into a little bit. And then also even now in some of the things that she does out there in Wyoming, in the Jackson area of Wyoming, where there's all sorts of outdoor things to get into. So I'm so glad that we've got her here, because her passion is deep. You'll hear it as we go through. And Eden, it's great to see you again.
Yeah, thanks for having me again. It's so nice to be a repeat guest on podcasts. It's always a huge compliment.
Well, we're really grateful at Run for God, just, that you hang around with our Facebook group, first of all, and that you take time to answer some questions. And I know there's been some benefit to you as well, but it's certainly been a big benefit to our group. As you know, anytime that you do anything in kind of a public forum, there's always somebody that needs to hear something. And it's a good way to get through. So
yeah, when I chime in here and there, I mean, sometimes I put out things that are a little more controversial, like you don't need to eat clean, and somebody's like, whoa, but that could be just something that, frankly, someone who has a altered relationship with food needs to hear that they don't need to be super strict in order to run well. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, yeah, because you're right. There's a lot of people who think, well, if I make a mistake, everything's over. And we have to be careful with that. So, well, obviously, nutrition, it's an important subject for everybody, even people who don't think it's an important subject, as I was once. But it's especially important to those we have a lot of folks who are changing what they do, right? They're going from a sedentary lifestyle to, okay, now I'm going to be active and I'm going to be doing stuff and I'm going to eat up a lot more calories out of my body. So, and again, we look at eating healthy as like choosing certain types of food. I like to have a salad for lunch is an example. And I'll put fruits and I'll put nuts in it. It takes some planning, and just having lettuce and some dressing is not enough. It takes more planning than that. And so I have to add something to it. I often put beans in my salad so that I can get some sort of beans or nuts, so I can get some sort of protein in that. So a lot of people look at, I use that example because a lot of people look at a salad as, well, that's a good example of really good, clean eating, but it doesn't provide everything I need to feel the best that I can feel. Right. So if I go run and all I eat is a very, very basic salad, I don't feel good that afternoon. I realize I need more than that. And so you mentioned that you've seen people who talk about eating healthy. but they're missing out on a lot of things because your body needs to be fueled properly. And I bring that up because that's the way I feel and I know how it works. And so how can our folks make sure that they get the right mix of nutrients and make those runs feel better as they run?
One thing I talk about a lot with clients, I literally just got off the phone with a client this morning, and we talked about changing the amounts of what she eats based off of her training volume. So if you have people that are going from a sedentary lifestyle to including running on a regular basis, they are going to need more carbohydrates than they needed before. They're going to need more carbohydrates before their run. For longer runs, they're going to need to think about what their body can digest to replace what they're losing during their run. And then after their run, they need a recovery meal or snack with protein and carbs. And I think a lot of these people, like if you sit down to a salad before you go for a run in like an hour and a half, one, that could be too much fiber before you go run, depending on what's in your salad. So you could end up with indigestion while you're running, which sucks. On top of that, it may not have enough overall calories to support your training volume. So that's what I would get people to realize, is that when you change your training volume, you have to change what you're eating around that training to support what you're doing.
Yeah. Again, it's like pouring, I don't know, kerosene into your gas tank. You know, will kerosene run? It might run your car for a little bit, but it ain't going to be long.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, off of that, I was just talking to my boyfriend about this yesterday. I was like, I don't like the phrase food is fuel either,
Really?
because like if you think about it, food is so much more than that. Does food fuel our bodies? Yes, but we're not cars. You know, we are so much more complex than that. And so I do want people to fuel their body, but I also want them to fuel their experiences. So like thinking about the social aspect of food is also important. So food is fuel, but it's more than that. So
that's a good way to put it. I hadn't really thought about that. Of course, you know, I'm very utilitarian.
Yeah, so I know you're very much like it has a purpose and it has a time.
And I look at fuel. Food is not social to me. I don't enjoy social food. Right. So my thing is I need to cram down enough that I can keep going. And that's the way I live my life. The
last time I was on you and Mitchell,
but most people aren't that way. The truth is we're the oddballs, not folks who think like what you're talking about. So people like me don't think about it. Well, we think about, I think about vegetables a lot because I know we talk all the time about how we don't get enough, fruits and vegetables in our meals, but fruits and vegetables don't carry a ton of calories either. And so if we fill up on too much of this good stuff, like the salad that I mentioned earlier, if you fill up too much on the good stuff, you may not get enough, like you mentioned, calories. And so a lot of times we can feel full and still not have enough calories, can't we?
Right. Especially if with fruits and veggies, you might be filling up on fiber, which is great. That gives you that full feeling. But if your calorie needs are elevated just because your training volume is going up, you're not going to meet that with just fruits and vegetables. And that's where you do have to take into account, like you might have to eat foods that you might not think are as healthy just to get the caloric density in there. And there's a concept that really made a huge difference to me when I was kind of rebalancing after having a lot of athletic injuries, and it's energy balance. So basically throughout the day, you want to take in enough energy, enough calories to keep your body in a plus or minus of like 400 calories on that baseline. And if you're just doing fruits and veggies, it's very hard to be at that baseline. So when I explain to people how they should be structuring their plate, yes, I want fruits and veggies on there, but I also want healthy fat and I also want protein. I want all of those things because the fruits and veggies are good, but the protein rebuilds your muscles. The healthy fat is there to keep you full, and it also promotes hormone balance. So all of those are important to a healthy plate for I call it the athlete's plate. Yeah. And so depending on your training volume, you have a high training volume plate, a moderate training volume, and a light training volume. And on those plates, what changes is usually the proportion of starchy carbohydrates. So a light training plate, let's say somebody that's only running once a week or so, that would be a light training plate. But if you're running 3 or 4, 5 times a week, you're going to need more than moderate. So you're going to need more starchy carbs than just veggies. And
so many people think carbohydrates are the enemy. We hear it all the time, and it drives me crazy, but
yes, I'm still just I think it's just nutrition marketing. It's also like throughout the decades, we see so many different diets that have been promoted to us. Like, for example, like the Atkins diet in the early 2000s, just any diet. I don't know, the keto diet right now, one that drives me nuts. And I would never recommend that diet to any endurance athlete, because whether people like this or not, carbohydrates are your muscles and your brain's preferred fuel source. Yeah. So a ketogenic diet is putting your body in a starvation state, and that's just not good for runners. And also it was developed for epileptic children. That's the reason why that diet was ever created. But yeah, everybody's a little bit different, but everybody does need carbs, whether they think so or not, they do.
Right. And that's where you mentioned that the keto diet, because, and I had this later on in our notes, but the keto diet really teaches your body to burn fat. And I get that. And that's a great thing, right? I mean, if you're trying to lose weight, trying to burn fat is a good thing. But if you're not getting because here's the thing, if you're going to be a ultra distance runner and you're going to run 50-mile runs, or you're going to run them at a very slow pace, you know what? You can fuel yourself with fat and you can get away with it. But if you're going to run a 5K and you're going to be doing something that's much more intense, fat is not going to give you the energy you need. It just can't. It's impossible. Your body can't work that way.
It breaks down so much slower too. Like it takes longer for your body to do that. So another thing, if fat loss is somebody's goal, the things that work for fat loss are not sexy. It's getting 7 to 8 hours of sleep a night. It's eating solid meals, 3 solid meals throughout the day. It's fueling during your workouts. It's strength training. It's the basics. And what happens when you do that is you increase your metabolic burn, which does change your body composition. And you don't have to go on a super strict diet to do that. But that takes a little bit more effort and a little bit more introspection and looking at daily habits. And people don't always like doing that. They want the magic button. And I'm like, you know what? If you wanted long-term results, you would start with consistent habit change. So the things for like fat loss. So for example, myself, during the pandemic, a lot of us gained weight. I did. I was drinking too much alcohol. I wasn't eating enough actually around my activities. I'm just being honest here. And so I was like, oh my gosh, I'm in my 30s. I guess this is what happens. Your metabolism slows down. No, I wasn't eating enough and I was drinking too much alcohol and I was sleeping like crap because we all were so stressed. And so I ended up getting a mountain bike, getting into an endurance sport. And what I did, and I did lose weight and I gained muscle, but it wasn't my goal. I just was like, I want to fuel myself better on my bike rides. I started, like if my rides are longer than an hour, I started having carbs, fluids, and electrolytes. I would just eat after the bike ride, drank less, slept more, and the weight just fell off, but it wasn't the goal. And I wasn't on a strict diet to do it. It was more of a fueling mindset.
Yeah. That's good. Everybody is a little bit different, right? So, but in this day, we tend to do one of two things. We tend to either supersize everything and eat way too much, or we tend to try to starve ourselves. It's usually one or the other. And how do we figure out what's the right amount? How do we know what the right amount of food is?
Well, first of all, the first thing you said, I just want people to get away from the extremes. When it comes to nutrition, it's like, find this middle ground to where you can enjoy some of those foods that are more nourishing to your soul, but maybe not as nourishing overall. But while also just I don't know, we need to find the middle ground there. But how do we know we're getting the right amount of food? One, you won't be fatigued all the time. You'll actually have more energy throughout the day. You'll come into your runs and you'll feel more refreshed. And the easiest way to do that is, again, to fuel before your runs, have a pre-run snack. If you're running for longer than an hour, have a plan in place for that. Have a recovery meal and snack, eat enough food throughout the day, be mindful of your alcohol intake, the basics. And then if something still feels off when you're doing that, that might be a time to get some blood work done to see if something else is off. Like we talked in the last podcast, Mitchell's son had low iron. So that's, if you're doing all the basics and you actually are, and you still feel off, that's a time to see if something else is going on. But
and sometimes it's really simple. I'll tell you one of the things that I did. I remember now I don't even want to say what I was eating. I was eating something for lunch every day. And what I was noticing was when I went for a run in the afternoon, I just felt awful. Like I had no energy and I was just lethargic and I just felt.
Tell me what it was. I need to know.
I was eating ramen noodles.
I can see that's the thing. It's I would have felt a little lethargic with that too.
But here's what I did.
I don't think processed foods are terrible. It's just there's a time and a place. Yeah, but right before a run might not be.
Well, let me tell you what I did though. I started adding beans. I started adding about 4 teaspoons of beans on top of in with the ramen noodles, and it fixed my problem. There was just no protein in there at all. And I just needed a little bit more protein, and it made me feel better. Now, since then, I've changed to a plant-based diet. And I mean, I very rarely am tired anymore. I mean, it's amazing. Now I get pretty consistent sleep, but being on and my diet is consistent. You mentioned consistency. If you can be on something that's healthy and consistent, it can mean everything, right?
Yeah. Well, to that point, like if it's around if you can do something around the holidays, around vacation, if it takes into account real life and you can be consistent with it, you will be successful. If you're on something that is so strict that doesn't account for those occasions in life, you won't fail. The diet will fail you.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a good way to put it. Yeah. And there's so many diets out there now that you mentioned a couple of them earlier, but there's so many that they're really gimmicks. They're like shortcuts, right?
Yeah. But they're not even like a shortcut because they don't really get you the result you want. It's just like, I mean, I get to this point, I'm like, how many of these do I have to debunk? How many times do I have to debunk it? Like, I mean, I guess it's over and over again because like, like I've been in the Run for God, like community for a while, but there's still new people that come into the community that haven't heard the first podcast episode. So it's like, all right, I got to keep debunking this diet. Like, it's just throw it at me. Let's see what comes to my head. Like but they are very gimmicky, and I don't even like the word diet anymore. Even as a dietitian, a registered dietitian, it's in my job title, but we are just so used to having to be on a diet versus just following a consistent dietary pattern.
Yeah. I like that thought. Yeah. And that's, I've been through that. I see that. I've seen a lot of occasions where people will say, for example, if I run in a fasted state, then I burn more calories. And so people do that on purpose. Like they starve themselves and then they go run on purpose without any food because they burn more calories. And a lot of times that's for people who are trying to lose weight. So we know that's not good for us. What's the proper way to fuel ourselves before a run? And then, what does it look like? We won't talk about eating during the run, but before and after a run. And that can be, we can start and talk about, regular short runs all the way up to, running for an hour or two.
Yeah. So just to touch on it real quickly, I don't recommend fasted training because one, it's a theory. So fat adaptation and fasted training, like there is a lot more research to support fueled training. And from what I know, and from my experience as a collegiate athlete, yes, you might be burning more calories, but if you dip below that 400 minus, like I was talking about with energy balance earlier, if you're in an extreme caloric deficit, what happens is you can increase your risk for injury, hormone imbalances, sickness. And so you don't necessarily want to be burning more calories that way. You want to be burning a consistent amount to where you're like in just a slight deficit. That is going to lead to a health, like if weight loss is the goal, that leads to healthy weight loss to where you're not just wreaking havoc on your metabolism and your hormone health and immunity and everything else. So like, yeah, cool. I mean, you might burn more calories, but that may not be the best practice. So what is the proper way to fuel ourselves before a run? So what I like to tell people is like the closer you get to your run, that's the simpler you want the fuel to be. So if it's been more than like 3 hours since you've eaten something and you have about an hour or 45 minutes before your run, simple carbs are your best choice. Low fiber, low protein. You want something that can be broken down quickly. That way it literally gets into your GI tract, is able to get into your bloodstream quickly to where the energy will be used right when you're running. That is the point. So there's no point of being afraid of those carbohydrates right when your body is about to use them. So for example, if I was going to wake up, I like to strength train in the morning, or if I was going for a bike ride, I would usually have something like a banana. That's fine. A few pieces of dried fruit, like dried mango is one of my favorite things, 5 to 7 pieces. That's about 30 grams of carbohydrates. So I usually recommend 15 to 30 grams. That's a banana. That's a few pieces of dried fruit. If you struggle with solids, you could try a glass of fruit juice, an 8-ounce glass of fruit juice before a run. That's fine. And again, those carbohydrates will be used immediately. That is their purpose. So after a run, It depends on how long the run is, but you do want to refuel with protein and carbs. So the protein is there to rebuild the muscles you just broke down. The carbohydrates are there to replace the glycogen, which is the stored form of carbohydrates that's in your liver and your muscles. So you're replacing that. That way, the next time you come into a run, you have carbohydrate stores that will be there. Like if you run out of blood glucose, there's some that can be released into your bloodstream to be used. So the ratio of that is either 2-to-1 or 3-to-1, depending on the workout. So for strength training, it's a 2-to-1 ratio of carbs to protein, and the protein is around 20 grams and then 40 to 60 grams for carbohydrates. So if you have a longer run, it's going to be 3-to-1 or 4-to-1 for that ratio.
So that's not a ton. That's just a little bit of food into your body to get you keep going.
That's a smoothie. That's a bar and a piece of fruit. That's just something, but something is better than nothing after a run. So for example, in like the 2-hour period after you finish a workout or a run, your body is looking to replace what it lost. And a good example is that there's an enzyme called glycogen synthase that is more active after you've been that it's looking to replace the glycogen in your liver and your muscles. And it's more active right when you finish working out. So that's why it's important to have a post-run meal or snack.
I don't think I've heard that put that way. That's pretty cool. Yeah. What's interesting is that the studies that I read specifically about running and performance in running, there's only really now, other than the things that are illegal, obviously, there's only 2 things that increase performance in running. Do you know what they are?
Caffeine and carbohydrates.
Well, caffeine. Yeah, that's it. Caffeine and sugar. Those are the 2
caffeine
things.
and carbs. Those are the 2 things that are so well researched.
Yep.
Those are the 2 most researched ergogenic aids. And if people don't, ergogenic means like a beneficial substance.
And we have so many people trying to get rid of carbohydrates and caffeine.
Yeah. And so like my recommendations around carbs are obviously like include carbs around your activity. And with caffeine, just try not to have it after 2 p.m. That way it doesn't impact your sleep cycles. But like a cup of coffee in the morning before your run with some of your pre-run carbs, perfect.
Yeah. Well, that's good. So you sent me an article that I thought was interesting and told me something I didn't know, because contrary to popular belief, it basically said intense exercise does not always make you more hungry. I always felt like exercise makes me more hungry. And I don't know, maybe it's different for different people. I don't know. But with that in mind, a lot of people are uncomfortable with the idea of forcing themselves to eat if they don't feel hungry. But it seems like to me, sometimes we need to do that. We need to get fuel in there, even if we don't feel like eating. Is that accurate? What do you think about that?
Yeah, that's what I would say. Like, that's time to eat for function or eat to a plan, fuel to a plan. For example, if I'm going mountain biking, it is a very like strenuous activity. It's hard. And there are times when I'm like, I can't eat food on this bike. Like I can't like stop and have a snack, but I can drink something. And so it's fueling to a plan. When I was recovering from female athlete triad, I had a registered dietitian also recommend to me, he's like, even if you're not hungry sometimes, I still want you to eat every 3 to 4 hours. It's for function. It's to help your body get back to a baseline, to homeostasis, to where it can be healthy again. So it's not necessarily if they consider it forcing, I would say just reframe the mindset around I'm forcing myself to do something. It's like, no, I'm giving my body what it needs. I'm fueling it when it needs it. And it's not forcing if you think of it like that.
Yeah. Well, can we take a little bit of a side note? I didn't put this in our notes, but you mentioned the problems that you had. And you also mentioned that we've got a lot of folks that don't know who you are and haven't seen you before. And this female athlete triad that you had. Can you explain just real quickly, kind of a little bit of that, what that was and why? Yeah. I mean, it's a real good illustration of why our food is so important.
Yeah. So for people that don't know me, don't know my story, I was a collegiate softball player at Texas A&M University. And that's not really a sport you think of where somebody would be more and like feel this pressure to be lean, but I did. And there's a bunch of background to that. But basically I got to this point where I was under fueling around my activities. I was eating a lot of food, but just not enough. And I developed these really strict rules around food too, and wouldn't eat dessert or foods that I thought were quote unquote clean. And what would happen is when I would have those foods, I would binge them. Sometimes I would purge them. I just felt so guilty about it. But that was the problem. If you just are so restrictive, by the time you have something, you feel like you have no willpower around it, versus if you mindfully eat it and let yourself have it, it loses its power. But I've read a book that was really good. It's just the problem is sometimes athletes, we can be a little bit too obsessive and just, single-minded towards something. And so I just thought if I was the leanest and fastest I'd ever been, then I would be the best athlete. And that actually was not true. I lost my period for 3 years because, like we were talking about earlier, I wasn't taking in enough calories, enough overall dietary fat to promote hormone balance. And so if you don't have enough fat going through your body as a female, your body will shut down certain processes to make sure that the basic ones keep going. So basically your reproductive health takes a back seat. So if you are a runner and you don't have your period, that's not normal. Don't think that it's just because you're fit. It's not true. It means that something is off and we need to talk. And then on top of that, I ended up with bone imbalances. I had stress fractures. I had bone deterioration in my hips and my shins and my feet. And it all just kind of came to a head my senior year. I ended up with 3 stress fractures in my foot. And finally, I was able to sit down with an orthopedic and another dietitian, and they were just like, this is what's going on. And I felt just like I was trying so hard to be so perfect that I ended up driving my body to the ground. And that's what happens when you don't give your body what it needs. And so it showed me, and I think everybody should take note that just because somebody is lean, that doesn't mean they're healthy. They might look perfect on the outside, but their body could be falling apart on the inside. And that's exactly what happened to me. So female athlete triad is the 3 issues, the secondary amenorrhea or primary amenorrhea, which is loss of period, bone issues, and a disordered eating attitude towards food. They've expanded it to where now it includes men. It's not just women. And so the way that manifests itself in men is they actually end up having erectile issues. That is actually a sign that there could be some hormonal imbalances. I know a lot of men that have disordered eating patterns around food. They have body image issues just like women do. And so I think it's important to note that it's not just a female issue. This is an issue that impacts a lot of men too. And I think in our country, in the world, women have been made to feel like it's more normalized for us to talk about our body image issues and disordered eating. And men kind of just have to shove it down and not talk about it because it's not masculine. And that's just not true. And so I just want any man out there to know that it's okay to talk about this. And I get it. I mean, I have plenty of male athlete friends that have struggled with it too, which, one of them is one of my favorite sports nutrition buddies. His name's Jackson Long, but he has a podcast called In the Flow. And actually, Dean, you would really like it because he's a plant-based athlete, but he's talked about his own struggles with this. And so I just want people to know how prevalent this is and that you're not alone if you're going through it.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. I hadn't really thought about it, but I remember when, just a couple of years ago when I was eating Crystal burgers 3-4 times a week. I mean, because that's what I liked. That's what tasted good to me. So that's what I ate. And it was not good for me. Now, I told everybody it was good for me. And that's why I could run fast, was because I was eating that. But the truth is I probably would have been running faster had I not been eating that. But as a man, that was my attitude was, I can eat whatever I want to. I think there's a line in a book called Once a Runner that says, if the furnace is hot enough, you can burn anything, even cheeseburgers. And, we get that feeling that, as long as I work out hard, as long as I'm a hardcore athlete, then it doesn't matter what I eat. And then nothing can be further from the truth. So our diet can be related to a lot of problems, can't they? You mentioned the injuries that you had, but we also talked earlier about the way you feel, but so many health issues can really be related to our diet, can't they?
Yes, for sure. I mean, we could talk about chronic issues that plague our country, but we could talk about injuries too, for sure. And like the reason why I had those injuries, the bone issues, is because without enough dietary calcium, like your body will take calcium from your skeleton. It's this major reservoir for calcium, and your muscles need calcium for contraction. So if it's not getting enough from the diet, it'll take it from your skeleton, and that can lead to injuries. But I mean, there are tons of things. Yeah. Like, do you have a specific, oh gosh.
Well,
think disease or anything in mind that could be related to diet? I mean, we could talk about diabetes, talk about heart disease, all these things, but I also don't think it's all just diet. I think it's culturally too, like the way that our country has shifted over the past several decades. And yeah.
So you think we're going in a bad direction?
I don't know. I'm not really sure what the future, because like it's difficult. So for example, I lived in Atlanta for a while, and some of the populations that live in Atlanta, they just don't have access to a lot of the fresher foods, and maybe they don't have the income to eat organic and eat, go to the farmer's market. And so like, it's not their fault, like that's kind of like where we are at culturally. And so like, there's a reason why I don't say only eat organic or only do this, because that is exclusive to those populations. And I'm like, if you can get frozen and canned veggies, that's fine. I just want you to eat more of them. That's fine. And I also think what we talked about earlier, like in our country, we have a problem with this all or nothing mindset too, when it comes to like maybe seemingly unhealthy food. It's like, if I never have it, then you end up binging it when you do have it. And so I just think that if I could find a way to keep putting out the, be comfortable with the gray mindset towards people versus the black and white all or nothing mindset, that would be a better direction for our entire country when it comes to health versus it having to be so perfect all the time. Perfection is just not realistic.
That makes sense. So what about the link between stress and eating? I mean, I know I've heard the term stress eating before, where people, they get stressed and then they eat, but can it work the other way too? I mean, can what you eat actually cause you to be more stressed?
Of course. Yeah. I mean, there's a reason why like the Mediterranean diet or the DASH diet are recommended, because they're better for brain health, and they do reduce stress in the body. And as much as I hate to say this, like more processed foods do create more, stressful reactions in the body as well. So that's why it's good to eat more fruits and veggies, because they, provide antioxidants and fiber and all these other benefits to us. But I think there's still a balance there with that. But when it comes to stress and eating, I think we a lot of times think of emotional eating due to stress, but there can be the opposite too, where you're so stressed that you end up with indigestion or mouth sensitivities, or you're not sleeping as well, which causes indigestion. So like they can go either way. So like, for example, like for you, like when you're stressed, what happens to you in your digestion?
Yeah. Your stomach gets, you get this feeling in your stomach of just uneasy and
Yeah. So like for me in the past, I moved to Jackson after I got divorced, and I went through my divorce. I was really struggling to eat enough food. I ended up with, and this has happened a couple of times since then. So I'm actually really grateful it happened, because if you can understand how stress manifests itself in your body, you can find ways to, help. So like when that happens, and this happened a few weeks ago, like there's times where I'm just like worried about work or the state of the world or anything, and just or family stuff. There's a lot of stuff going on behind the scenes that people don't know. We only see this perfect, like on social media, we only see the highlight reel, and a lot of people don't see the struggles behind the scenes. And so sometimes for me, when I'm feeling extremely stressed, as opposed to emotionally eating, I have trouble eating enough throughout the day. I end up with mouth sensitivities, like textures or temperatures will hurt my mouth. And then I end up with indigestion. And I'm like, that is a response to stress. And so I think people should be more aware of that too. And if they're not sleeping as well, that can also impact like their gut health and how their body digests food. So,
yeah, that's, and of course, you're not necessarily a professional sleep expert, but sleep is one of those things that, I mean, a lot of people don't connect sleep with a lot of things. And I think we're becoming less so, but at one time you were like a hero if you could get by on 4 hours of sleep a night. That's so unhealthy. And it's not just the amount of sleep; it's the consistency in your sleep.
Poor sleep habit, like a poor sleep diet. That sounds funny, but like
Yeah.
Like that can cause more stress. That's bad for your brain. That actually increases cortisol production, which is your stress hormone. You need a certain amount of it, but too much of that can actually lead to muscle damage. So it's like, no, sleep is incredibly important. It's incredibly important for recovery too.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, our whole group's going to start training soon for half marathon. And then eventually for a marathon. That's obviously going to mean that folks are going to get to running longer and longer. Some of our folks are already running long, but a lot of them are on this journey along the way. And so as we get into these runs where you do have to run, we talked about what you eat before and after the run. What do we need to look at during the run, you think?
So there's basic recommendations, especially if people are just starting to get to these longer runs. What I would say is you want to start with around 30 grams of carbohydrates an hour and increase it. You have to train your gut, just like you're training your body over a long period of time. You have to train your gut to take in more carbohydrates. And it's easier to do that with like a slow drip. And when I say carbohydrates, you can get them in fluids too. It doesn't have to just be food. And another reason why clean eating doesn't always work as an endurance athlete is sports nutrition products are portable and easy to carry. So for example, like I have some energy gels, like they're called Muir energy gels, but like one of those has it has like 45 grams of carbs. And like, I could wear that in a running vest or something if I was a runner. But what I would say is like, as you get into these longer runs, you want to start with something that your GI system can handle. And the easy way to start might be with fluids. And so a sports drink that you like might be a good option, like carrying that in your vest or your handheld water bottle. And usually those contain sodium as well. So just the basic recommendations for starting those long runs, especially if it's hotter where you guys, because I know it's way hotter where you live than where I live. 30 grams of carbs an hour, 250 milligrams of sodium, ballpark there. Just depends on if you're a heavy sweater or not. And then usually 750 milliliters to a liter of water per hour if they can. So those are my basic recommendations. And then people should alter those based off of their sweat rate and what their body can tolerate. But the longer the runs get, the more they're going to need a fueling plan. They are going to need to think about it.
Yeah. Yeah. Cause it gets to a point where your body just isn't going to handle it. And you're just going to completely, it's just, it's going to be like, we don't want to talk about cars, but it's like running out of gas.
Yes. Yeah. And also, we've talked about this in the last one. You don't want to try anything new on race day. You want to train with the fuel that this is the time to figure it out. If you're starting training right now, it's time to start incorporating nutrition around that training to where when you get to race day, your body is ready to go and you don't throw anything new at it. So you don't have like any GI issues.
Yeah, because it does. And what I do is I use a particular type of energy gel, and I use the same one all the time. Which
one?
Goo.
Okay. Yeah, Goo's super popular out here. I actually haven't tried Goo yet, but like, I got sponsored, but it's not sponsored. One of my sports dietitian friends started working for Muir Energy, and they're just really simple ingredients, but Goo is great too. They make Cliff blocks. Those are pretty good. I've had those when I went skiing. Another company I really like if somebody wants to start with liquids or even like gummies, Scratch Labs.
Yeah.
Love their hydration mix. It's probably my favorite. When I'm mountain biking, I'll carry water and a water bottle with sports hydration mix in it. So.
Yeah. There's a lot of different types, different ways. I tried the gummies and the blocks, and I have a hard time with it.
But exactly. You tried it. You had this trial and error period where you're like, let's try these different products. Let's see if I like them. And anyone who says they have too much sugar, that's the point.
Yeah.
They are made to provide carbohydrates to your body while you're being active. That's the point.
and you're going to burn that.
Yes. It's literally going to be burned energy to keep you going, to keep you from bonking. That's the point.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. Well, I know that recovery is an important thing. So I'm really strict about making sure that when I get through, I do that smoothie thing you were talking about earlier. That's my go-to thing. I've got probably 8 different things I put into my smoothie. But you talked about, I can't remember where I saw it, but you talked about the 3 R's of recovery. Mm-hmm. So what are those, and how do we use those as strategies?
Okay, before I define those, I want you to replace a word that you just said. Say, I'm consistent about making sure I get something in my body as opposed to strict.
Oh, that's a good point.
Just because it's that all or nothing thing. If you think you're strict, but like consistent. Okay. I am consistent with making sure that my body gets the recovery it needs. So the 3 R's for recovery, what are they? So you want to replenish, rehydrate, and refuel. And I said those in a weird order, but you might have seen it on social media, or I might have put it on Facebook. I can't remember, but so replenish, that's where you're taking in carbohydrates to rebuild to replace the glycogen from your liver and your muscles that it just used. To rebuild, you take in protein to rebuild the muscles that you just worked and broke down. Because whenever we do anything, like if we're doing strength training or something else, muscle tears, that's how we get bigger muscles. Like in general, like you're breaking down muscles, you're creating these small tears. And so you want to provide protein to fill in those tears. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And then rehydrate is just with water and fluids. So you want to replace the fluids that you lost. And an easy way to tell if you're hydrated or not is to look at your urine color. You want it to be kind of this translucent yellow. You don't want it to be clear yellow because that's like overhydrated, but you want it to just be like slightly translucent yellow. And darker than that, probably need to take in some more water. But yeah. How do we deploy these strategies successfully? A smoothie is great because it literally has the fluids, carbs, and protein. One thing I do as soon as I finish an endurance activity, if I'm carrying a sports drink with me, I finish my sports drink because it's got carbs, fluids, and sodium in it. So it's replacing everything, like except for protein. And so then I'll go have like a snack after. But it's just like when you're done, one thing I say to people is your workout or your run or your bike ride is not finished until you've recovered from it. So if anybody needs to hear me in their head when they finish their run, be like, you're not done running until you've recovered from it.
That's good. That's good.
Like you're making a note of that. You're going to put that in the Facebook group.
No. Actually, I had a note on my head, and then it went out of my head, and I had to get it back. And so I wanted to type it in while I was thinking about it. There's a book that's written by a guy. Do you know Dr. Tim Noakes?
No, I don't.
Okay. He's a South African doctor who he wrote a book called Lore of Running, and it's literally like 1,200 pages long. I mean, it's everything you could ever possibly want to know about running. He also wrote another book called Waterlogged. And in there, he talks about how we are overhydrated often. When you talked about your urine being too clear, he talks about the dangers and how when a professional marathoner gets through with a marathon, he loses up to 6% of body weight. The fastest guys lose that much weight. And so his contention is that being a little bit underhydrated is preferable to being overhydrated. Because, I mean, obviously on the extreme end, if you're overhydrated, you can die from it with hyponatremia. But on the underhydrated side, he recommends that you don't quite replace what you lose. In other words.
So what I would say, it's good to be hydrated, like perfectly hydrated, like not over, not under.
Right.
But that's why sodium is important to replace, because it keeps you from being like overhydrated. It keeps you from getting hyponatremia. Exactly. So because if you're not replacing sodium, that's what hyponatremia is. There's not enough sodium in your blood.
Right.
And without it, what happens is like sodium and water follow each other. And if you don't want to be dehydrated, because then your blood volume will be too low and it'll be harder for your blood to deliver oxygen to your working muscles. But if you're overhydrated, that's not good either. Like you want this perfect feeling. Balance. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. You probably just feel like heavy while you're running if you're overhydrated.
Yeah. Yeah. But we've pounded into people's heads that you have
to drink more water. Yeah.
You got to drink this much water, and the truth you mentioned earlier, sweat rates are really important because, I mean, there's a huge difference from one person to the next on how much one person sweats as opposed to another. Even the same person, as I've gotten older, I sweat more now than I used to sweat. I don't know why that is, but for whatever reason, I sweat more than I used to sweat. So you got to really pay attention to the amount of sweat. And you mentioned the different climates earlier.
Yeah.
That makes a big difference, whether it's super humid out or it's not. I mean, 90 degrees is not 90 degrees. 90 degrees with 90% humidity is a lot different than 90 degrees and 30% humidity, right?
Right.
As far as our needs.
So if somebody's in a hot and humid environment, like that's actually where I might recommend like actually starting to sip on a sports drink right before they go run, like maybe like 8 ounces of something that contains sodium in it. That way their body can hold on to the liquid that it needs once they start running. But there's actually a lot of dietitians now that are doing, like they're talking about minerals a lot more. And so if you have a runner who's peeing all the time, let's say they're not running, like just during the day, they're peeing a lot, it could be like a mineral imbalance. And I'm newer to this area, but one thing you'll see is a lot of dietitians making like mineral mocktail guides, and they contain usually like sodium, potassium, vitamin C, and magnesium. And those are like the electrolytes that we find in sports drinks.
Yeah.
To keep us hydrated. I'm like, this is it is sports nutrition, but it's more applied to everyone, which is kind of cool. But I think that sports nutrition applies to everyone, period.
Well, and I take all of those things as supplements as well.
Right. And so I'll tell you the truth. I don't take really any supplements. I try to get all that stuff in food, but that's something I've just considered. I'm like, maybe I should start making more of these, or like, if you wake up one day and you're dehydrated, or like if you consumed alcohol the day before and you feel more dehydrated the next day, you can consume something like that has some minerals in it and fluids, and you'll feel more hydrated than if you just drink water by itself.
Well, something else just hit me that I thought I would throw in. I'm throwing you curveballs here now, but one of the things we learned with COVID is, I say we didn't necessarily learn anything with it, but what we recognized was that many of the people who had bad outcomes with COVID were low on vitamin D. Mm-hmm. Do you recommend vitamin D supplementation? How do you, what's your thoughts on vitamin D?
My general blanket statement here would be, before you start taking any supplements, get blood work done to see if you're deficient before you start taking something. Yeah. That being said, the 2 supplements I recommend to most people are vitamin D and omega-3 fatty acids. Vitamin D, just because I live in a place where it's very difficult to get enough sunlight all year round. And so most of us at this altitude and this latitude are deficient in vitamin D. And like you said, there was research to show, and it wasn't necessarily causation, but there was a correlation between vitamin D status and susceptibility to COVID. So yeah, I do recommend getting vitamin D because it is more difficult to get from your diet. There's some products that are fortified with vitamin D. You can get it in mushrooms and eggs, but the most readily usable form is actually dormant in your skin, and it needs UVB rays to be activated. And that's just harder to get, especially like when we get hot and we're like protecting ourselves from the sun, you're not getting that. But at the same time, it's like, but you still like need to wear sunscreen. It's just like, yeah. So I would definitely recommend vitamin D to people, but I would first say, go get your blood work done and see if you're deficient before you start taking any kind of supplement.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, one of the other supplements that I take is B12 because I am on a plant-based diet.
Yeah, if you're a plant-based diet, I highly recommend that too. Yep.
Yeah. Okay. So, because I think that for some people who don't necessarily, they may not be plant-based eaters, but they don't really like meat that much either. Those folks could be deficient in vitamin B12, right?
They could be. Yeah. It'd still be something just to like talk to their primary care physician with, be like, see if they have a concern about it. I don't eat a ton. Well, I'd eat more meat now than I did than the last time we talked, but it's definitely something to think about.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, there's a million different diets out there. We've mentioned some of them. And so I'm just curious, I know you're not a fan of diets in general, don't even really like the word, but, is there a diet or two out there? You mentioned the Mediterranean diet being a popular, maybe not so bad diet. Are there some that you think are not bad diets for an athlete to follow?
The Mediterranean diet is good just because it includes a lot of healthy fats that are brain healthy fats, especially with people that are doing more activities like this. Like unsaturated fatty acids will help with, I kind of just I don't know, allude to their like joint lubrication in a way. So that's why I like that diet. But I do think that it needs to include a little bit more carbohydrates around activity. So if you want to adapt the Mediterranean diet, that's great. I'm trying to think if there's anyone that I actually like. Somebody sent me an article from a functional medicine doctor, and I was reading his diet, and it was pretty much the Mediterranean diet, but it was still like too strict in a way. And I was like, no, I can't endorse this. Yeah. Is there
That's
one
the
in
problem
mind that you have a question about?
No, not really. I think that's the problem. Well, I mean, in my case, there's not a particular diet, but I try to stay plant-based.
Right.
And so that's a diet, but it's not a commercially, available. Here's the plant-based diet, I guess. I don't know, but
yeah. If there was, I would never recommend a diet to somebody. It's more like, let's look at your daily intake and see where we can add more. If there's one thing I want people to think of when it comes to nutrition, and this is my messaging usually, it's like nutrition and health shouldn't be about taking away things. It should be about adding more to your life. Like adding certain foods will add more energy versus I feel like most of us have been told that we need to go on a diet. We need to do less. We need to take in less. We need to weigh less, all of these things. We need to be less. And I'm just really sick of that mindset. So I'm telling you, I've got the abundance mindset. What can we add to your life to where you feel better?
Yeah. Well, I remember talking with somebody one time, and we may have talked about this on the podcast before, but I asked them, why is it that there are so many people who are starving themselves? They're literally they're not eating enough calories to keep themselves going, and they're overweight, and they're not losing weight. Mm-hmm. Can you explain to folks why that happens? Because that's a big deal. I see that all the time. People are like, I can't cut out any more food, and I'm not losing weight.
I would actually say that they've probably damaged their metabolism by taking in too little calories for too long. Their body has gotten used to not taking enough food. And so it gets to this point where when it does get fed, it holds on to fat because it's not sure when it's going to get food again. And it's metabolically inflexible. And so the way to change that is to do everything we were just talking about. It's to get enough sleep. It's to strength train. It's to eat actually complex meals throughout the day. So it seems counterintuitive to people to eat more to lose weight, but you have to change the way your metabolism is using food after years of starving it. A good example is I have a friend who is a Himalayan alpine guide. And so he goes over to the Himalayas and loses a ton of weight every time, but he eats more while he's over there. He actually eats more meals. Like they actually have more downtime. It's when they're not climbing mountains. And so he'll eat like chicken and rice. But then he comes back to the Jackson area. He lives over in Teton Valley and he gains weight. And the reason why he gains weight is because he's trying to stay lean, and he'll go climb all these mountains. He'll go biking. He'll undereat all day. And then he gets to the end of the day and he has dinner, and then he has more than dinner because he's still starving. So he's trying to catch up. And then he has 5 or 6 beers plus that. And so he ends up gaining weight. And what happens is he's putting his body in this like fight or flight mode to where it's not sure when it's going to get fed again. So it just hangs on to it. And he's like, I don't get it. I'm so active, Eden. Why is this happening to me? I'm like, you're doing the same thing. You do this every time. You go to the Himalayas, you lose all this weight, like you're eating consistently. And then you come over here and you go wacko and you just don't eat enough. And so I think that's like the most common thing with those people. It's probably they're not eating enough around their activity. And then they would probably hate to say this, but they don't have any willpower, quote unquote willpower. They feel like these intense cravings, and then they feel like their body is hanging on to fat. It's because they're not eating enough around their activity, not eating enough earlier in the day. And then their body is just like, when it does get fed, it's like, I'm going to hang on to this because I've been starved and I need energy, and fat is stored energy. So that's what the body is doing. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does make sense.
Yeah.
So let me, here's another thing that's become popular. And right now the name of it is escaping me, but it's where people eat only within a certain, like a 4, 6, 8 hour
intermittent
window.
fasting.
What's that?
Intermittent fasting.
Yeah. Intermittent fasting. Because you were kind of describing that with this guy that you were talking about. So what about those folks who really advocate for intermittent fasting?
The research around intermittent fasting, the good effects of it are in sedentary individuals. there's no real positive research when it comes to endurance athletes and intermittent fasting.
Huh.
So, and I just, again, we go back to, there's more research to support fueled training versus starved training. And I have also, so even if you see research that promotes weight loss or blood sugar control with intermittent fasting, look at the study populations, look at who those people are. If they're not doing the things you're doing, then you're not going to get the same results that they have gotten. So, I mean, if you're an endurance athlete, I'm like, please don't do this. Just don't. I also think it'll put your body, again, in that negative energy balance where it's going to be too much. And then also, it's just another restriction around time. It is another diet. It's a restrictive diet around time. And I want people to remove this restrictive mindset, whether it's around food or time, and get back to like fueling basics. So, like eat every 3 to 4 hours, fuel your runs, get good sleep. Don't drink too much alcohol. That is way better for you than intermittent fasting.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
So do you like my plant-based diet?
I do.
Yeah.
I mean, I have plenty of friends who are plant-based athletes. And again, like if you're taking vitamin B12, if you're making sure you get enough protein, you probably recognize this as a plant-based athlete. You do have to eat more diverse sources of protein to get all the essential amino acids. But no, I think a plant-based diet is great.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, good. Yeah. Well, do you have anything else that we didn't cover that you think we should have covered, or?
Oh, I mean, I wish I could just like recall those 4 points. So for people listening, before we hopped on, I sent Dean an article from Outside Magazine about like how eating healthier might not be better for your performance. And I would highly recommend people go read this because, and also, if you are in the Run for God Run Club, you are an athlete. Like you do need to fuel like an athlete, and just don't think that because you haven't been doing it for a long time or this or that, or I'm not sponsored. I don't care. If you're moving your body in a way that you enjoy, you are an athlete and you should fuel accordingly. And I think that's the misconception, is like, people don't think that they can work with me because I'm not an athlete. I'm like, well, in my head, I'm not an athlete. But at the top of the podcast, you described me as an athlete. And so anyone who's listening, if you're moving your body, which you are, you're an athlete. Fuel accordingly, be kind to yourself, and don't be afraid of food. It is literally there to make you run faster and run longer and recover better.
Well, one of the things that we've done recently, since the last time you were on our podcast, is we've included walkers. So we now have a pretty good walking population, and walkers tend to think of themselves as less than runners because, well, it's just not as strenuous on their body. And so they can't be, but I'm telling you, some of these workouts and things we do, when you do them as a walker, they'll tax you pretty good. They might not get into your lungs as much, but Mitchell and I, Mitchell did the whole walking program last year. And so we got to the point where he was at the half marathon stage and he was going to walk the half marathon. And so our goal was to walk a half marathon in less than 3 hours. And so we did, but man, was I sore the next day. Oh my God.
Different muscles. I mean, like, that makes sense.
I could not believe. I mean, I'm not that sore after a marathon.
Yeah.
After running a marathon. So walkers have a tendency to think that, but walkers are athletes too, right?
Absolutely. I was telling a client earlier today, last summer, I broke my toe playing women's softball, and I couldn't do some of the big things that I like to do. Like usually I like to climb one of the Tetons on my birthday, and I couldn't do it. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm going to gain weight. And that's not true. All I did was I started walking a little bit more, still strength train, rode my bike, and I still kept the same body composition. And I mean, walking is so great for your mental health, one, but you don't need to do hours and hours of cardio to lose weight if that is your goal. Strength training and getting extra neat movement, non-exercise activity thermogenesis type movement, taking the stairs, just going for a walk, getting up from your desk, standing up, just doing extra movement throughout the day, that all counts and it's all good for you. So walking, if you're a walker, you're still an athlete.
Yeah, well, good. You know, I've got a friend of mine. He's a movie producer, and he's constantly fidgeting. You know, he never stands in one place for long. He's moving from this spot to this spot. He's fidgeting, you know, while he's talking, he's moving around. And, you know, I think about him and I think about all these people that are like that just naturally move all the time. They're never overweight. No. Those people are always in pretty good shape because of what you're talking about. I never put those two things together before.
Yeah. The guy that I'm seeing works at like one of the best restaurants in Jackson. He's the GM. He's always on his feet, like during the day, doing something. And then he gets a couple bike rides in during the week or skis during the winter. And I'm like, he doesn't strength train like me. He doesn't do those things. And yet he still has this, pretty good body composition. And like, he doesn't really care about being ripped or anything like that. He cares about being functionally fit for what he likes to do. And you just have to keep moving. And I think that's honestly, so the walkers, if there's anything I could encourage them with, like, I hate to say it, sorry, Dean, but like, it'll be less pounding on their joints as they get older. So when I was recovering from female athlete triad, the orthopedic I saw was like, yeah, no running for you. I was like, yes. But it was just because like I don't have any cartilage in my knees. I've got some hip problems. So cycling is actually great for me. Yeah. So like, find something that you can do that you enjoy. Like if you like going for walks, great. Like especially like morning walks or evening walks. There's actually some research to show that a walk after your dinner, like just going for a walk, let's say you go out to a restaurant, you just go for a walk after, like downtown Chattanooga, that actually helps with blood sugar control. Like walking is amazing.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad you say that. And those are good examples. And it's a good lesson for all of us, because I think that often we think of exercise as I'm doing this thing for this period of time, but there's a lot more to it than that. We can do a lot of things. There's a reason why these stand-up desks are becoming more and more popular, because people are realizing they can move while they work. And,
one thing I started doing was like daily push-ups. And people are like, oh, I'm not good at push-ups. I'm like, well, I wasn't either. And all I did was I just started with 10 a day, and it's just a movement break. Like movement breaks are good for your brain too. And like standing up from your desk, a stand-up desk, like all that stuff there, it all counts.
Yeah. All right. Well, I can't tell you how much we appreciate what you mean to us at Run for God, and just helping folks to be healthier. That's our goal. Obviously, we want folks to find Jesus and find their salvation. But for many people, they just want to learn how to live better. And you really have done a lot for us to help folks to have better lives, because they're just healthier, and eating is a big portion of that. And I really appreciate your approach, because again, like you said, there's so many people, you chastised me for using the word strict, because that's the way people talk and it's the way people think. And so getting away from that mindset, I think, is important. And I like the way you put it. So thank you so much for that.
Yeah. And it's hard. Like, I always feel weird when I catch people and I say something, but I don't think we quite have realized how much we've internalized this diet mentality, even if we're not dieting. And words like that, or even, one of my part-time jobs in town is I work at a women's clothing store. I started modeling for this store owner, and actually her husband is from the Dalton area, which is funny. But like one thing I hear is the way that women talk about their bodies. And so sometimes I don't do it in there, but like with my friends or with my clients, there's certain words that they will use where I'll be like, let's actually not use this word anymore. Or one thing that I've chatted with a client this morning was we always see this messaging that we have to love our body. And I would actually say that's really difficult to do. Like as we age, a certain thing, we're not going to love our body every single day. But one thing that I think that is helpful is learning how to accept our body, even if it doesn't look the way we want it to or function the way we want it to. It is still an incredible thing that we are able to move every single day, and it's a blessing. And so accepting our bodies for the functionality that they give us is something all of us should be working on.
Yeah. Well put. Well, we'll finish with that. And again, we appreciate you being here.
Of course. Yeah. Thanks again for having me.
While you're working hard to keep your body in shape physically, the music you listen to while you run can help keep you in shape spiritually. We've partnered with J Radio to put together a group of running playlists by Dean, Lane, Holly, myself, and others that you hear here on the Run for God podcast. Plus, you can listen to a playlist put together by members of Run Club just like you. Check out the whole station of Run for God playlist at jradio.com and in the J Radio app.
All right, we're back. And, Eden is so refreshing. I love her take on the way she looks at diet is... She doesn't like the word diet.
Well, I was going to say she doesn't like the word diet.
She doesn't. And she doesn't like the word strict. She points that out. And
Sure.
There's a lot of things that she looks at it a lot more practically than most people do.
Right.
And I really like that. And I'm a practical person myself. I like to think in common sense terms, and that's what she does.
Yeah.
And so hope you got a lot out of that. It's sort of like, I thought about this analogy. Sometimes we look at diets like we're building a bridge, and as if we leave one part out, the whole thing's going to come falling down.
Sure.
And what she does is she tells us, she kind of knocks the leg out of that argument by saying, no, this isn't building a bridge. This is just, it's driving your car and you took a wrong turn. You just turn around and go back and you get back on the path.
Yeah.
And I think that's refreshing. Well, we had an interesting thing that happened this week in the professional world. There was this big uproar because Cooper Tier, our 1,500 meter national champion, was at the hospital. And then the next day we found out he had just cut his finger. So that was pretty good.
You got to dramatize everything nowadays.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
You know it. And they're dramatizing this too. Jerry Schumacher, who has been the Bowerman Track Club head coach for several years now, is now the head coach at the University of Oregon.
Really?
Yes. That just happened. And so I don't know what's going to happen with the Bowerman Track Club and how that's going to, I don't know if I think he's going to try to take care of both. But some of the Bowerman Track Club folks, I think, are going to move to Eugene. I'm not sure exactly.
Haven't there been several Bowerman people leave over the past few years?
There have. There's always people coming in and out.
Is that okay?
Yeah,
I guess I follow a few that have left, and I didn't know if that was something going on, coaching styles. I don't know.
I don't think so. And of course, Shelby Houlihan, with the positive drug test, she's a Bowerman Track Club athlete, and so. But for the most part, all the circles and all the people that I hear really feel like Jerry, if there was any doping going on with Shelby Houlihan, they feel like that was a thing that she was doing on her own, that it's not part of the program. Now, what's this, our 5 and 10,000 meter guy, Grant Fisher. Grant Fisher is a Bowerman Track Club guy.
Okay.
And so he's still with them and doing well, obviously.
Yeah.
So it's going to be interesting to see if Oregon can come back to the top of the sport in cross country with Jerry Schumacher at the helm, because they've not been as good it's been since 2011, I want to say, since they've been in the top 3 or 4 in the country. We still think of them as being there all the time, but they're always good, but they're not what they once were.
I mean, you just naturally think running Oregon.
That's right.
But it's not been that way for a while. Yeah.
That's right. Yeah. And then this big story came out about Mo Farah. Did you hear about this?
I didn't.
So Mo Farah came out with this story about how he was trafficked as a child. At 9 years old, he was taken from Somalia to Great Britain. Just in a really weird way, where this lady kind of took him away from his family and put him on a plane and didn't tell him what was going on until they got to Great Britain, and he had to work as a servant for a family there in Great Britain.
Really?
For a little while, until somebody got wind of it. And then they took him away from there, and they gave him a foster family that was from Somalia, who kind of knew him and understood him. But Mo Farah grew up in pretty rough circumstances and went through some tough things. And he was one of those kids who, because he was taken from his country and put into this whole different atmosphere, he kind of felt out of place. And so he started, when he got into junior high school, he started running track. And that's where he kind of found his belonging. That was his thing. And once he found that, his whole life turned around and changed. Wow. And so it's interesting that this is, obviously he's known this, and he's just kept all that quiet. We talk about how we don't know what other people are going through, and this is just one of those things. Here is a 2-time gold medalist in 5K and 10K, one of the greatest runners of all time, and he's gone through all this adversity, and we never knew it.
So how did it come out? Did he just decide to start talking about it?
He just decided to start talking about it. Yeah.
That's crazy.
And they had an interview, and I just one of the things that I think about here is I think about how I've seen working in and around academia and people who are in academics, a lot of times they talk down about like PE classes and athletics and things like that. And I always hate to hear that because here's a case of that saved his life.
Yeah.
I mean, that just really changed his life completely. And it can be so important. Now I realize there's not going to be many Mo Farahs, but for a lot of people, that's really where they find some purpose for their life. And, well,
I mean, it's an outlet, not just for your entire, but even at a young age like him. I mean, you talk about the young man in your neighborhood.
Yeah.
That's an outlet that school's not going to do that for him. It's something that he can make his own. And that's important for all kids, really, that they find something that's not mom's, it's not dad's, it's theirs.
Yeah.
And we see that a lot. We see the bad side of that a lot, where parents try to live vicariously through their kids. I had a friend of ours, one of our sponsors, Billy Barton, come up to me yesterday. I saw him out, and he was talking about Landon. He said, "Man, I've seen." Landon's just killing it right now. And I said, yeah, who would have ever thought? He said, the best thing you ever did, you didn't push him. Yeah. And Landon has kind of taken this sport on his own now, and he's flourishing. And it's helping him on every aspect of a 16-year-old. It's not just the running, but confidence and all those things. So, yeah, and more times than not, for young people, it is sport that does that.
Yeah, it is. It was for me.
Yeah.
It's exactly for me. It was 100%. Yeah, and here's the thing from a Christian perspective is people are much easier to reach with the gospel when they can find a comfortable spot to be in, I feel like.
Sure.
So when somebody just feels completely out of place and they're just, they don't understand why they're even living, it's a little bit harder. But when somebody finds something like running that makes them feel a purpose, I think people then begin to wonder.
Well, you have a commonality. I mean, it's the subtitle of the devotions book. It's Finding God in a Runner's Space.
Yeah.
You've got to. You're right. It's hard to just approach somebody cold with the gospel, but when you got something in common, the barriers come down, and it's safe.
Yeah.
It's a good way to do it.
Yeah.
Just to find commonality with people first, and then present them with the gospel.
Yeah. Well, Mo eventually did get a chance to reunite with his mother. And I saw a picture of that. I can't hardly talk about it because it's just, I can't imagine going through that. And
how old was he?
This was just in the last couple of years, I think.
Really?
Yeah, I think it's just recently. I mean, I don't know about that. That might. I'm speaking out of turn here. I'm not sure when it was.
Yeah.
But yeah, his mother gave him up. He actually went to live with his uncle first before he was taken away. Because his mother just couldn't handle it. And Somalia is a place that's really tough. There's a section where he's from. It's called Somaliland, which is actually a place that's not recognized internationally as a country. And so, he's it's a great story where, his whole, I mean, imagine if he had stayed where he was and he hadn't been this, when we talk about God's plans for our lives, if he had not been taken from Somalia, we wouldn't know who Mo Farah was today. Very possibly.
Yeah.
We never would have known who he was. And, God uses these really bad circumstances sometimes to.
Just pulled it up. Said he was reunited with his mom in 2000.
Oh, okay. So it's been a while back.
Yeah.
So it was while he was running.
Yeah, he's just now started to discuss it.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. Very interesting. So, and, he was, if you know Galen Rupp, he's the best American marathoner. Galen Rupp and Mo Farah used to train together. So, yep. So it's an interesting story. I love it.
Yeah.
We had a trivia question for this week. This one's very simple. And, I was reminded of this. My old high school coach he wants to start a newsletter. So he sent me this newsletter that he had created and said, what do you think about this? And he had one of the things he talked about on there was this question. So I thought it's a good trivia question.
We need to have him on here.
We do need.
I've thought about that more than one time. I don't know if he would do it
I've asked him.
Have you?
I have asked him.
What does he say?
Well, he doesn't say anything.
Well, that's about what I was thinking.
Yes. What I would need to do is say, I
Trick
need you
him.
to be here on this day.
We're
And
going
he
to
would
do something.
He would do it. He would do it, but it's going to be a challenge because you know how he
You
is.
have to pull it
he's,
out of
He's a man of few words.
Yeah.
So,
But you're a
yes.
man of many words, so
Yes.
that kind of offsets.
I think I could pull it out of him. But
Let's make that happen.
yeah, we need to get him to start telling some stories.
I mean, just the story of his running streak.
Oh yeah,
I mean, that you could take up an hour with that.
easy.
I mean, because there's stories that come along with that. Running every day for how many years?
47.
Wow.
Yeah, he has so many stories. I mean, I heard stories back in the 80s that he used to tell that were amazing stories. I mean, he's forgotten more stories.
You'll need to write them down
that I
before he
know.
gets here, and
Yeah,
you can
I need to.
prompt him.
Yeah, I need to do that. Yeah, that would be a fun thing to do. Let's do
Okay.
that. Let's do that. Let's do that this summer. Let's do that in the next month or two.
You set it up. Yeah.
All right, I'll do it. I will do it. All right, and so here's the trivia question: who won the first ever Olympic marathon? I'll bet you don't know the answer to this one. I'll bet you never heard the name before. It's a cool sounding name, though. So
I don't.
if you know
I
that,
want to say we've talked about it before.
I don't think we have. And that's what struck me was I don't remember us ever talking about that. So I thought it would be a good trivia question because I really don't. Now maybe we
I want
have.
to say we have, Dean. I don't remember the name.
Well, we'll see. We'll see if anybody remembers.
What was the instance where you talked about, they got in the cars and
Oh, that was that was later. That was 3 Olympics after the first Olympics.
oh, okay.
Yeah.
Well, maybe we haven't talked about
Yeah, I don't think we have.
Okay.
Yeah. But we will next week when we give the answer. And if you know the answer, you can send it to dean@runforgod.com. And if you're the first person to get that answer to me, then you will win a Run Club tumbler.
Yeah.
So be the first person.
I love this motivational thought of the week.
Yeah. Well, every week I share a reason why running is so awesome. And so I wanted to share this week.
Oh, I jumped ahead of you, didn't
You did.
Well, I really like it.
Yeah. The reason why running is so awesome is it saves lives. Just look at what it did for Mo Farah.
Yeah.
I rest my case.
Yeah.
Period.
All right. Now I love the motivational thought.
The motivational thought. We've all heard this one before. Probably a lot of people have heard this one, and I always love this one. So it says, "This is the way it goes." It's an African proverb. I think
It is.
I
yeah.
saw it
I'm pretty sure it is,
attributed
yeah.
to different people. Like this quote is attributed to 4 or 5 different people.
Really?
Yes.
I've always heard it as an African proverb.
One of the ones I've seen it attributed to is Roger Bannister. So I'm sure Roger Bannister. He may have said this, but he was only quoting.
I was going to say this
Yeah.
has got to be older than that,
I would
because
think
this is not just about running.
That's right. Here it is. Every morning in Africa, a gazelle wakes up. It knows it must outrun the fastest lion or it will be killed. Every morning in Africa, a lion wakes up. It knows it must run faster than the slowest gazelle or it will starve. It doesn't matter whether you're the lion or the gazelle. When the sun comes up, you better be running.
I love that.
It's a good one for sure. It's a dog-eat-dog world. We don't get up and get ready for it to face it. And that includes spending some time in prayer and in the Bible. And that we can face any day when we've got Him with us, right? All right.
All right.
Well,
Episode 122.
122.
Down in the books.
That's it. So until next week, may God bless every step of every run. Go out there and shine your light.
Good job, Dean.
For more information about the Run for God ministry, go to runforgod.com. If you have questions about your salvation, click on the Peace with God tab. There's nothing more important. Thanks for joining us today.